This is tutorial number 5. We are going to examine the most complex part of this entire simulation, which is the sequence of play. The sequence of play, it was designed to simulate the interaction between an initiative player that has the initiative and a reaction player. But it is complex, so let's go through it on land. There are 3 action stages that resemble each other, but are distinguishable in important ways. So we're going to go through those 3 action stages to see how combat on land flows. So referring to this map, we have Iranians and Iraqis fighting over Abadan. You have a number of main units. You have an armored brigade, an armored division, an infantry brigade on the Iranian side, an infantry division, an armored division, an infantry brigade on the Iraqi side. Now, in addition to that, you've got headquarters. Here's an Iraqi headquarters and Iranian headquarters. And Iranian and Iraqi headquarters units are able to put units in reserve. Now, these reserve markers are put on these units prior to the beginning of the action stages, at the beginning of a turn. And a headquarters can have a number of reserve units equal to the reserve number. Now, both the Iraqis and the Iranians have a number 3, which means they can put under reserve a brigade, 3 brigade equivalents. In other words, a unit that's got 3 brigades or 3 separate brigades, and a division's got 3 brigades. So, and they must be within 5 hexes to be able to do that. And so these 2 Iranian units had reserve markers put on them, and they're within 5 hexes of this Iranian headquarters, and the same with the Iraqi headquarters. So let's go through each of the action stages. In the first action stage, the initiative player, which in this case is Iraq, can move its frontline units. Now, a frontline unit is a unit that does not have a reserve marker, in other words, these other units. So these 2 units could have moved into place, but in this case, they're not moving. And these frontline units can then declare combat. And so these 2 units are going to declare combat against this hex. Now, at any time during this turn, before or after this movement, Iraqi Air Force can bomb targets. But this type of bombardment is not close air support. Okay, that'll come in a very specific segment within the first action stage. Now, after the frontline units have moved, the Iranian player, as the reacting player, can then move his reserve units. Now, in this particular case, the Iranians want this stack to be well protected, and so this headquarters is going to move this Iranian division into this hex. Now, this reserve movement can only be with regard to joining a declared combat situation, in other words, declared by the Iraqis. This unit may not cause combat, and it cannot simply move on the board. It must enter into a declared combat situation. It cannot move next to it. It must move into the hex where the combat situation has been declared. Now, in the later part of the first action segment, the Iraqis can then bring in close air support and bomb the Iranian targets, and the Iranians can bring in close air support and bomb the Iraqi targets. Only in that particular segment can close air support be brought to bear, and then the combat is resolved. Let's assume that nothing happens. In the second action stage, the initiative player can then relocate units that have a reserve marker on them. So the frontline units have moved, they may not move again. And so in this particular case, the Iraqis choose to maneuver this division with a reserve marker on it and to relocate it along the road next to these Iranian units. These units may declare combat, and so the Iranians declare a second combat situation in this hex. Now, the reacting player can then again move their reserve units, and this Iranian player has got another reserve unit up here. Now, the stacking limit is 5 brigades per clear hex, and so the Iranians relocate this brigade for a total of 5 brigades in the hex. And again, they can do it because they're within 5 hexes of the headquarters. And then this combat situation is resolved. Now, in the third, and again, close air support can only be conducted in the close air support segment, and any bombardment done before that is not counted as a part of the close air support. Now, in the third action stage, The reacting player can now move their frontline units. There are none here. The only frontline unit is the one at the bottom of this stack, and it can declare a combat situation. The reaction player may also move any remaining reserve units that have not already moved. There are none here in this particular case, so the Iranians declare combat here. And now the initiative player may respond if they had units with reserve markers on them that were still available. These units could then move in and reinforce this combat, and then this combat is resolved. So you see that the general flow is in the first action stage, the initiative player moves his frontline units and declares combat with them. In the second action stage, the initiative player moves the reserved units and declares combat with them. And in the third action stage, it switches, and the reacting player moves their front line and available reserve units to declare combat. So there's an advantage here for the initiative player. They get 2 opportunities to declare combat, whereas the reacting player has only 1 opportunity in the third action stage.